webinar, Making Sense of Online Marketing for Education. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I'm sure so many of you already know, online marketing really is an opportunity for your school. Stats actually show that parents and students are searching for schools all the time. One stat shows that 40,000 search queries are processed by Google every second. That's a lot. And 83% of those searches actually begin with an unbranded search term when they're searching for a school. That means they're searching for things like top boarding schools in New England or schools for disabled children versus the actual name of your school. The truth is you might actually be getting a lot of searches for your school's name, but if you think about it, the majority of those are probably already associated with your school, and they might just be out there looking for your phone number or updates to the school schedule. Now, there's really a lot that goes into online marketing, and we're going to cover a lot of the foundations today, and that'll help you to be successful. The thing with online marketing and education is you really want to make sure you're building relationships and confidence with people that your school is the right choice. And it's really imperative that your enrollment marketing campaigns address multiple elements or use multiple tools in order to reach the right people and get your message across. Now, online marketing is not just for getting new enrollments, but it's really going to be there to help you to support your current students and families as well. And I know for years we've really been talking about the importance of online marketing, meaning email, social media, website, online listings, and stuff like that. And really a lot in the last couple of months has changed, but the foundations of online marketing really hasn't. It's only intensified now that the internet is really our main conduit for interacting with each other. So if you're just getting started with online marketing for your school, or maybe you've been trying it for a while and you're not feeling like you're getting what you need, you might be overwhelmed by too many tools or too much expert advice that's out there on the internet. And that's really what we want to help you with today. We want to help you to understand and navigate this world of online marketing for your school. So let's see more specifically what we're going to be covering today. We're going to start by talking about how people actually find your school online, how to set yourself up for success, and also how it's all going to come together in the end, because all of these tools that we're talking about need to be working together. Before we get into all the details, I want to introduce myself. My name is Stephanie French, and I'm the content manager for webinars here at Constant Contact. And I'm really excited to introduce our guest speaker for the day, Chuck Bankoff. Do you want to just say hello, Chuck?
Hi. Hey, everybody. Yeah, and I also want to thank you for reaching out and offering me this platform to talk about school marketing. We're a school marketing agency, and more than that, we support education. So hopefully all of the schools that are tuning in can take away a couple of nuggets that they can use on their own.
Thanks for joining us, Chuck. I'm sure our audience is going to gain some real value from all the tips and suggestions you'll be sharing throughout today. So thanks for joining us. All right, so let's go ahead and get started by talking about how your school gets found online in the first place. And I want to start by talking about this whole idea of word of mouth, because we typically find that many schools say that most of their enrollments are coming from word of mouth. That makes a lot of sense, right? But when done correctly, online marketing actually provides you with more opportunities to really extend your reach on what's already important with this word of mouth. Now, the problem with word of mouth is it's really not scalable, and you can't control how much is happening with your audience. The foundation of word of mouth is really built on the relationships with the current families in your school. And online marketing is really going to help you to strengthen those relationships and really extend your reach with that. You just want to make sure that you're there, you're online, and you're being a part of those conversations as well. So that's just one way that people might find out about you. The other, as I mentioned before, is actually getting found in an online search. And it really helps to have an understanding of what actually can show up in the results, because people might be out there searching. If they know of your school's name, they might search by your school's name, or they might search by the type of school that you run. And either way, you want to make sure that your school is showing up in those search results. So, Chuck, I was hoping you might be able to walk us through what comes up in a search result if someone goes in and searches for something like the name of the school, in this case, Congressional School.
Yeah, and let's kind of define this, what a branded search is, right? It's every business is a brand, a school is a business, right? So someone who's searching specifically by school name, there's a reason for it. Typically, the reasons are, as you alluded to, word of mouth. That's pretty important. I mean, word of mouth, it comes with some sort of an inferred recommendation, right? Maybe neighbors um, or spouses, parents, people have heard about the school, they're talking about it, and it started a search for a specific school, right? Also, word of mouth isn't scalable, but it's very powerful. Okay. Other reasons people might be searching on your school is other forms of advertising. It could be, I mean, we've worked with schools who do billboards, you know, along the highway, radio advertising. We're more closely associated with digital, whereas maybe we're doing targeted display advertising. And people may not remember the URL, but they remember the name of the school. So they reach out later after the fact because they remember the school, but they don't know the website, right? The other one is what I call the lazy parent syndrome, which is parents of existing students are looking for the phone number and they're too lazy to remember the schools, either write down the number or to remember the address, and they just search and they click on it. But in all cases, it's good. It's showing that you have a certain degree of brand awareness. So when you do get a lot of traffic for your name, Google actually looks at that favorably, right? Google likes to promote brands. So if you do have people coming back, constantly searching for you by name, you know, it's really going to help your search engine rankings. Okay. Now, looking at the screen here, I see we have three different sections here. We have the paid ads, and we'll talk a little more extensively about how to leverage that later. But you'll notice the paid ads, they're always going to be on the top. The reason being, there's a reason why Google is one of the richest companies in the world, and it's not by giving everything away for free. Okay, so whoever is willing to pay is going to show up higher on the search term. Now you'll also notice here that underneath the ad, there's what we call the six pack. There are 6 choice pages that are on there, right? That's something we can somewhat control in this circumstances. In this circumstance, there's probably not a lot of people who are competing with Congressional School, that's the name of this particular school, right? They're just paying for their own domain name. And since Google doesn't really have anything to fill up the space, they give a little more airtime to some of the other things that you're seeing on the search results. So what the heck, that's pretty good. Also note that running a paid ad for your own name is probably the cheapest click you're going to get, because if no one's competing for your name, you can get it for a very, very cost-effective price. You're bidding, so you're going to get the rock bottom price. So, you know, you can make a decision. Do we really want to bid on our own name? Well, if your budget allows for it, I would recommend it. If you're tight, then maybe you might want to pass that up. Underneath it is what we call the organic listings. That's where the natural search rankings are. And it may be difficult for you to see because this is a screenshot on a virtual meeting, but the first ranking here is from Great Schools, greatschools.org, right? Usually it could potentially be the school's own website. In this case, it's a review from another site, right? Underneath that is Twitter. So what this is telling me is that, you know what? If you properly have your profiles on many different properties, when people search for your school by name, you're going to dominate the entire page. Okay. Let me see here. Yeah, and on the right side is Google My Business. And do not underestimate how important that is. That drives a lot of things. It reviews, the Google Maps, as we'll see probably in a few moments. And so a branded search like this, it's your right and responsibility to make sure that you dominate, right? If you have a name like Congressional School in a specific area, well, there probably isn't a lot of competition. But there's a lot of schools that have a lot of similar names, and Google doesn't necessarily know which one you're searching for. So the more real estate you take over, the better visibility you have.
That's the biggest point with Google My Business. And we'll have Rachel share a link if you're not sure how to set up a Google My Business account. I would definitely recommend it because you get so much real estate over on the right-hand side or in a mobile search. It's the first thing that comes up. So on the other side of that is when someone goes out and they do a search, maybe not by your name, but by the type of school they're looking for in a certain area. In this example, day school in Falls Church, Virginia. Do you want to walk us through how this one looks a little bit different?
Yeah, that's called an industry search term, right? So they don't know that your school exists, but they're looking for a school like yours, right? So you're going to come up along with competitors. Google likes to display, they don't like redundant content. They like to offer the most accurate and versatile results they can. So they're going to pull in, competing schools as well. Now, what you see here is Google Maps. And well, you go, what drives Google Maps? Well, it actually, they pull the information from Google My Business, okay? And so you want to make sure your Google My Business profile is completely filled out with what we call NAP, N-A-P, name, address, phone number, right? They're looking for consistency. They're looking for the same phone number on Google My Business as they are on your website. So these things, they actually have the ability to check all of these sources. And Google likes when everything matches up real nice. Now, what you see here is called the Google 3-pack. We're only seeing two of the search results here. And this is kind of interesting that if you look at this, the first one, right, Falls Church Day School, right, they have 2 reviews. They're both 5-star reviews. Look at the one underneath it. They have 23 reviews, but they're average, what, 3.8, right? Reviews really will affect where you show up on this 3-pack. Underneath this, you can't see it, but you can click on it and you can see all the other results, right? But you really got to be on this 3-pack, right? There's a saying in our industry, what's the best place to hide a dead body? Page 2 of Google, because no one goes there, right? No one looks there, right? So you really want to show up here. Now, I do have an explanation why the school that has only 2 reviews shows up ahead of the school that has 23 reviews. Look at the search term, day school in Falls Church, Virginia. Look at the first search result, Falls Church Day School. Google looks at what you're searching on, and you kind of sort of do get extra points if you have a URL or a name that matches the search term. Google tries to match that up as best they can, right? Another thing that you, in order to show up here, again, it's predicated on Google My Business, you want to make sure that you're in the right category. When you set this thing up, be very careful, right? If you're a school, make sure you choose the education category and not a restaurant category by accident, because if you do that, you're gone. Google goes, well, someone's obviously searching for a school and you're a restaurant, so we're not going to show that, right? So those are some of the little things that we're looking at here. And this is prime real estate. This shows up above the organic results. So this is another reason why Google My Business is so important.
Definitely make sure that Google My Business is set up. If it's one thing you do after today, I would definitely suggest starting there. Now, just if we were to scroll down on that same page, I just want to point out these are some other things that show up that are going to be important. You've got the website, other competing schools that show up in there, some listing sites, also social media. All of these types of things are going to play a role in helping you get found online. And another thing I want to suggest that you do after today is to run both of these different types of searches. You want to make sure that you're showing up, your school is showing up in both of these different areas so that you can maximize the potential that you have.
Mhm.
So this is really the foundation to what we're going to talk about next. And I want to just kind of recap a few things. So when someone goes out there and they do a search for you, you want to make sure that you're showing up in those search results. You want to have a variety of different opportunities in order to do that. And just remember, when someone does a search result, they're eventually going to click in and start to look at the information on your website. They're going to be looking at those reviews that Chuck is talking about. And you really just want to be answering those questions and putting yourself or your school in the best light. Reviews, answering any questions that they have about attending your school and what it's like. So that really is a good segue to lead us into this next section where we talk about the tools that are going to help you to set yourself up for success. There are 5 tools we're going to talk about here. So you want to make sure that you have these in place in order to have a good foundation. First and foremost, a mobile responsive website that looks great no matter where someone is searching on their desktop computer with a widescreen or a mobile phone. An email marketing tool, a primary social media channel, at least one that you're actively using, up-to-date business listings. That goes back to the search results again, where reviews are going to show up and just where people can find information that your school is available. And then also an easy way to create content. And we're going to work with Chuck here to break all of these down and talk about these in a lot more detail. Let's first talk about the mobile responsive website and why it's so important. Could you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, think about the age group that you're targeting, both parents and students, whether you're talking about students in the lower grade levels, K through 12, or maybe a little higher than K, and college students. The parents of everyone is on mobile. Mobile searches have surpassed desktop searches back as far back as 2015, according to Google, right? And so what you're looking for is what's called a responsive website design. What that responsive means that it actually adapts itself to the size of the device that you're looking on. So if it's full size, on a desktop screen like I'm on right now, it adapts to that. As it goes down to tablet size, it rearranges some of the elements on the page automatically to give the best user experience on a tablet, and of course smartphones even smaller than that to give a completely different user experience on there. And I always suggest that design for mobile first, right? Because if you design for desktop first, as we do website design for our schools as well as the marketing. If you design for desktop, you may have a little bit of fudging to do to rearrange things on mobile. But if you design for mobile first, desktop just falls into place, right? It's just a larger version of something that's already working on the smaller version, right? So that's kind of my recommendation in terms of responsive websites. I will say this: I don't see it as often any as much as I used to, but I'm telling you, I still see non-mobile friendly websites from schools out there. If you post a PDF, for example, it's just, and you view a PDF on a phone, it's just going to be a small PDF with little tiny letters on it, right? That's not the way to do it, right? If it's important information, you want to have an alternative version that can actually be read on a smartphone or a tablet as well.
Definitely. That's the most important part and probably the biggest tip to making sure your website is effective. You've got to create a great experience when they land there. Other than mobile responsive, what are your other 1 or 2 tips to create an effective website for schools?
Well, first off, realize that you may have 2 audiences or more than 2 audiences, right? You have families, existing families that come to your website for information, but you have to have the families, you have to do the enrollment, right? And if you're doing just an information dump on your website, and it's not really, it might be appropriate for existing families who are just looking for some information, but if you're trying to cultivate and nurture a family to inquire about maybe enrolling themselves or their family in the school, it's really about messaging, right? It's about, effectively to appeal to them emotionally, right? And persuasively. I always recommend that if you're writing the content for your website, to be headline intensive. People don't read on the internet, they scan, they see headlines and images and bullet points. If they like what they see, they will read more. I've seen a lot of school websites, like a lot, I mean, like almost all of them are written like a term paper, or they're just, or doctoral thesis, and it's just bland, boring information that someone who's investigating school has to wade through. So it really is about the presentation, the way you're writing it. You know, when we write content for our schools, we write it, we have, you know, we leave all the content there, then we go paragraph by paragraph, and we say, all right, can we condense this to 1 or 2 sentences? Then the next paragraph, and so forth. The idea is, don't make it work for someone to read the content through your website. You know, resist that urge to do that information dump. You know, Mark Twain once said, I don't have time to make it short. It's easy to, you may think, oh, hey, look, I just wrote 1,600 words. Well, that's probably 1,550 words too many, right? If it can be said with less words, say it with less words. Something else I would recommend on your website, use real images of real students. And if they're wearing like branded apparel or something like that, even better, right? I would rather see a mediocre image of obviously a real student or the actual school or something that's real, rather than a professional stock photo. People can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Okay. Another recommendation is keep your objectives clear. You don't have to explain everything, right? You can bury some of that, you know, people want to opt into it as they click through, fine. But the initial pages that people who are contemplating the school as the right choice for their family, right, is the objective is to get them to contact you, fill out a form, give you their email address, something like that, right? So it's to entice them, not to drown them with more information than they ask for. So I would say, you know, I could talk the rest of the session about websites, and but those would be my top ones. Just keep in mind the objective, make that emotional connection.
You've got so many great tips in there, and I especially love the one of keeping it short and make it easily scannable. Now,
Yeah.
we've actually put together a guide. It's called Making Sense of Online Marketing for Education. Rachel can share this in the chat window as well. But in that guide, it dives into a lot of the topics we're talking about today, but specifically for websites. We talk about the pages that you need to have on your website, as well as the questions you want to make sure you're answering for prospective students on there as well. Now, starting to lead us into the next tool, which is going to be email marketing, one tip I want to suggest that you do, and actually Chuck just mentioned it, is to add a form on there so that you can have a way to influence people later on. Ask them for their email address. If they visit your website and maybe they're not ready to enroll or take action or request more information, this is going to give you the ability to contact them later on your terms. So I would definitely make sure that's something that you're doing on your website as well as anywhere else that you can do that. So let's talk a little bit more about email marketing. Can you talk about how schools can effectively use this as their strategies? And I'm assuming segmentation and having your different groups that you mentioned before as well, prospective students versus current students as well, right?
Yeah, boy, you took the words right out of my mouth. Is, yeah, you really want to segment it, right? So you would have a whole campaign or series of emails that were designed for prospective students or parents, depending on the grade, who the target market is. Something more appropriate for a different segment, which are your current parents and students, right? To keep them engaged with the school, right? So yeah, of course you've got to keep the students engaged because they're the ones who are attending and learning, but you really want to keep the parents engaged so that they know that the school is doing its job, that their kids are learning. A forgotten segment is often alumni. You know, this could be the source of donations. It could be the source of testimonials and reviews. You know, to stay close to your alumni. You know, like a few ideas that you know, and just limited by your imagination. I mean, it could be current events or national holidays, or even made up holidays like National Technology Day or things like that. Just stuff, but the key is, be interesting. Don't send out an email just because you look at your watch and it's time to send out an email. Be interesting, be timely. School announcements or updates are obvious. Special events are obvious. Helpful resources. Maybe they're helpful resources about studying. Maybe they're helpful resources for parents to help their kids. For example, what about during the summer, right? How do you keep kids engaged, right? So even though you may think you're shut down for the summer, if you don't have summer school, it's still a great opportunity to stay engaged with the parents and help the parents stay engaged with the kids in terms of learning. We've campaigns over the summer about how the parents can keep the kids out of trouble, keep them learning and reading and doing educational things, and keep that education mode going. So that's kind of a few ideas that some of them, quite frankly, are pretty obvious. But with email marketing, there's a whole other thing I want to talk about. And that's when you're actually sending these one-off emails to a segmented list, right? I talk about automation, right? Automating these emails. That's something that you pre-strategize maybe as a campaign being a workflow or series of emails, right? So for example, anything that is replicable, right? For example, a welcome email, right? It could be an information after filling out an online form, right? So as soon as someone fills out a form, it goes in a database, it triggers a welcome email. The welcome email automatically inserts the parent or the student's first name, because we know what it is because they just filled out a form. There's a field for that, right? It could be follow-up based on opens and clicks for previous emails. So you pre-segment it, where is someone who opened up an email gets a certain type of follow-up email maybe a day or two later, okay? Someone who never opened up the email gets a completely different email in like circling back, trying to get them to open up that first email. Now, this takes a bit of planning, right? This is not just like, you're not just going to sit down and whip this out. This has really got to be well thought out. That's a good portion of what we do in terms of the strategies for our schools. Could be lead magnet follow-up. A lead magnet is something that's just interesting enough that a parent or a student will trade their contact information, their name and email address, to download it, okay? And so when someone downloads something, right, they would automatically get an email that was generated, and it may start a series of emails. And maybe I'll touch on that later as we come to the end. And another way is to re-engage lapsed applications. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Automatically, right? Not something you need to comb through and look at dates and saying, well, hey, this person never followed up with me. Well, if they never followed up after a predetermined amount of time, the email is automatically set to go out. This really frees up your time to do more valuable things, like actually talking to the student, talking to the parent.
I really love that. And your whole conversation, it really just goes back to making sure the information you're sending is relevant. I hear the term email blast all of the time, but we really want to make sure we're speaking to the different groups of people with the information that's going to be relevant to them. Email is another topic we could talk about forever. But for now, I want to move on and talk about the next tool that you want to have in your strategy, which is social media. So what are some of the best social channels to use for schools?
It depends on the age group of your target market. Still, to me, the reigning champ is Facebook. Facebook and Instagram. Facebook owns Instagram. So if you were going to do some paid advertising, you can do it all through the Facebook console. But even if you're doing organic posting, you're going to get a lot of attention on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram skews slightly younger, just a little bit, right? YouTube is a really good one. Videos are dominating the internet now, a YouTube channel for the school, even YouTube advertising could be really good. And speaking of video, there's a newer one you probably heard of called TikTok. Jury's still out on if we want to invest in that for our schools, simply because there's some talk of security issues, quite frankly, coming out of China, and they're taking a hard look. Microsoft was looking at buying it, which that might give some degree of legitimacy. But there's no doubt it has a huge audience to pretty much a very young crowd. But it's something we're keeping an eye on. We're not putting a lot of emphasis or any emphasis on TikTok just yet. We're just keeping an eye on it. One of the things I really want to differentiate, though, when we're talking about social media, is organic posting versus paid advertising or paid posting. There's a different purpose for each one, right? A lot of schools, I'll ask them initially, I'll say, well, what are you guys doing for marketing? And they say, well, we're posting on our Facebook page. We're posting like every day. I go, well, that's great, but that's not marketing to new prospective families, because Facebook, the only people who are going to see that are people who follow your Facebook page. And even then, it's only a small percentage of those who are interacting, right? Nobody new is going to see a post on your Facebook page unless you boost it, or unless someone who's following it shares it with their friends, right? However, it is a great retention tool. There's acquisition and retention. Organic posting is great for retention. It keeps people engaged with the school, up to date. It's great for parents. It's great for students. Real things happening around the school every day. People will follow, interact, but it's about engaging your existing audience. It's really not going to help you that much with your enrollments, okay? Acquisition, however, is really reliant on paid advertising. There's a reason. Facebook and Google, right? They got a lot of money, and like I said earlier, they didn't make their money giving all the good stuff away for free, right? Getting that audience and being able to target specific by demographics and geographics and things like that. So if you're looking at using social media for acquisition, you're probably going to have to leverage paid advertising. And I'll talk about like an actual strategy towards the end and kind of pull it all together. As a matter of fact, I'll pull all 5 tools together.
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit more for now, posting on the organic side. Can you talk about some of the types of things that people should really be thinking about?
Yeah, and when you're talking about organic, keep it real. I mean, that's what it's about. Organic is about keeping people interested and engaged. I mean, you can talk about the achievements of students or professors or teachers, school milestones, success stories. We've used success stories with paid advertising for schools, right? About alumni saying a few words, students who are no longer being bullied at their school, things like that. You can do virtual tours, like that's not uncommon. Virtual tour of a school, you can drive people to a page. But if you were, say, a university or college or a boarding school, how about a virtual tour of dorm rooms, right? As a matter of fact, we once were working with a boarding school. This is our only non-US school that we're working with in Czechoslovakia, and their school was in the mountains, and they go on ski trips, and they do all these things, and they have where they eat together in their cafeteria, which is more of a restaurant than a cafeteria. And what we did with that is we had one of the students volunteer wear a GoPro the whole day, and just a day in the life of a student. Then we take that, and then we're going to edit it down to smaller chunks. And now we have like a ton of just great day in the life. So you can be really creative with that sort of thing. You can post about helpful resources for, career planning or your post high school planning, world news if it relates to your school. And you can use polls. You can use SurveyMonkey or Facebook polls. to engage the audience and to actually acquire some valuable information.
Definitely. And all of those great things and ideas that you're talking about, they kind of fall into these three buckets, driving awareness, getting people to take action, register for a trip or whatever, and then also creating some engagement as well. So really great tips there. So
Yeah.
tool number 4 is actually listings and reviews. Could you talk about, obviously these can come up in the search results and help a school get found, but what are some of the listing sites they want to think about?
Yeah, so the more generic but important ones, because they're so popular and powerful. Well, there he comes. I see it coming on the screen, right?
Yep.
Facebook and Google My Business. I mean, that's not just for schools. Like every business should be on there. Google My Business. Keep in mind, Google loves Google. Anything you do to interact with Google, Google owns YouTube, if you didn't know that, right? That's why YouTube videos show up in Google searches. Okay, so Google My Business is really important. We had found, and this is dating back a while, I don't know if it's the number's still the same, but we kind of figured out that once a business, and a school is a business, gets 10 Google reviews, good things start happening. They start showing up in the map sections and things like that. So, but of course that has to do with how competitive it is. If it's a non-competitive area, then well, maybe you don't need 10 reviews, but schools are pretty competitive. And some of the other ones you got listed here, these are the same ones that we urge our schools, or we do it for them, like niche.com, private school review, and boarding school review. If you're a boarding school, great schools, these all show up in the search results. And the thing about having reviews in all these places is you can dominate the search results with hopefully 5-star reviews. You could just have a wall of them, right? So and by the way, I keep saying Google, but keep in mind there's Yahoo and Bing and AOL. There are other search, but Google's the 800-pound gorilla, so it's kind of the generic brand for search engines, right? But the search engines don't like to show the same content on the same search result. However, they're showing from different review sites, right? Different reviews on different review sites. As far as they're concerned, they're showing varied and accurate information. So by having listings and reviews on these different review sites, you can dominate the search results. You can dominate, you should dominate it for your own school's name, but there are cases where you can just dominate it in your market. And by the way, just my own personal thing, they who have the most 5-star reviews wins. Okay, parents want to know that you made other parents and students happy. Students want to know that you made other students happy, right? And one other thing, I'd like to talk about a good way to get reviews. Okay, well, the obvious way is to ask, right? Reviews are, for products and services, are naturally skewed negative. In other words, suppose you bought a vacuum cleaner from a department store and you brought it home and it works, right? Do you go, woohoo, my vacuum cleaner works, I'm going to go to Yelp and,
Right.
hey, my vacuum cleaner sucks, and that's great because it's a vacuum cleaner, it's supposed to suck, right? But you don't do that, right? If it's good, right? Because you get what you pay for, what you expect. But suppose it didn't work and you brought it back and you had a negative experience with the customer support person, right? That's when you're going to go to review sites and leave a negative review. So to kind of reshuffle the deck, you have to go out and you literally have to ask. You have to ask parents for reviews. So you say, well, how do we know what parents to ask, right? I mean, if you really want to skew the results, well, maybe you do a little research, right? There's something called a net promoter score. That's nothing I made up, right? That's where maybe you do a survey, right? And how would you rate our school, 1 to 5 for this, 1 to 5 for that, right? And then when you look at the results, it's a pretty safe bet that anyone who's rated you 4 and 5 stars will probably write a good review. If you get some 1 and 2 stars, well, that's great. information for you to have. It really is maybe there's some work for the school to do. Maybe you should reach out to that parent, but I don't think they're ready for the review yet. So that net promoter score is a good way to kind of sort through and maybe kind of, I don't know, hedge your bets a little bit.
I really like that idea. And going back to what you said for email, or email being, having alumni to contact. If you get that net promoter score from alumni, there you go. And you've got your segmented list. You can send them an email and ask them to leave you a review.
Mhm.
Let's talk about this last tool, which we're talking about creating content. Really, content is what people are out there. They search for, they consume it, and then they can share it online. And ultimately, that is going to drive you some traffic from the search results. What are some of the types of information that schools should be thinking about including on a blog?
Well, I think the first thing you have to determine is who you're writing the blog for. Who's your audience? Is it parents of students? Is it the students themselves? Or is it Google? Are you writing it for search engine purposes, right? The
Mhm.
hint is don't really write for Google, but kind of keep the SEO, search engine optimization best practices in mind when you do that. You can write about current events. I would also be heavy with multimedia in my blog post, meaning pictures, because people like pictures, videos, search engines like pictures and video. They like the fact that there's engaging elements on a blog post. You could post about study tips. You could do student profiles and maybe their accomplishments. Same thing about alumni and that sort of thing. Teacher profiles. Once we were trying to generate what we call user-generated content, right? So we had a school have a blog writing contest for their students, right? And they were given choices of subjects and right. What that did is it gave them a lot of basically free, honest, sometimes funny content that they post that was not only engaging, but it's more content that the search engines can index and rank from, right? Um, one of the things we did is I've done this with schools multiple times. I've had a blog writing 101 class. We've done it during professional development days for a local school. I've done it on the internet. And the idea is, all right, suppose you want to write for search engine purposes. So you need a certain amount of content, right? And you have 40 people, like administrators, instructors, right? And if each one of them wrote one blog per month, you'd have 40 blogs per month. Now, realistically, they won't. You'll be lucky if you get a third of that, but still, it's good fodder for that. I would also, there's a concept that really works well for SEO. Okay, keep in mind we're talking about the engagement, but we're also talking about SEO. It's a great opportunity to show up, right? And it's called content clusters. And this is a bit abstract. It's a resource I can provide people if they contact me, or I'll put it in the resource page for you. But I actually wrote a small guide on it. But essentially, think of it as one long content pillar that goes over a variety of important things like admissions, extracurricular activity. It could activities. It could be the athletic program, any number of different things. Then you write blogs that go into more detail about each one. And the blogs link to the main article, right? And the main article links back, kind of a hub and spoke. That's called a content cluster. That has a tendency to rank very, very high um, in Google. And I put together a little guide. I just realized that I can make that available to everyone if they contact me, or I'll see if I can make that available to you, Stephanie, and you can post that.
Yeah, if you want to share it with me, and I will include it in the follow-up email.
Okay. Okay.
That's awesome. I really love that tip about the content clusters and knowing you have some additional information on that. That's really great information. Let's talk a little bit more about the paid ads because I caught your part earlier where you were talking about reaching mostly existing students and family on social media organically for free. But could you talk about some of the ways that you can start to reach new enrollment candidates on social media and even with these Google ads?
Yeah, the number one thing is have a plan, right? The typical thing I see schools doing is, well, we're boosting a Facebook post, right? And okay, so like, what's the call to action? Well, there's no call to action. We send them to the home page, right? So you write something general in nature and hope that someone clicks on it, goes to the home page, and the home page has general information. It's not exactly a plan, you know. I like to say hope is not a strategy, right? And
Yep.
so I actually wanted to kind of outline a typical strategy that we use, and maybe the audience can like pull bits and pieces from that. But I want you to see that there's an actual cohesive strategy involved, okay? And so using paid ads, whether it's Facebook or Google or Instagram, right? Got to have a purpose. So what we do is we'll look at, all right, so let's look at why, who would be interested in our school, right? So I'm going to take one segment, right? A lot of people will change schools, go to a private school or a charter school, for example, for bullying. They're being bullied. There's social issues at their school, and their parents might be looking to move them on. That maybe there's an issue and that they have to address, right? And so you start off with, okay, who's our audience? Well, we're targeting female, and by the way, I'm making this up, like your audience will vary, right? Females between the ages of 24 to 39 that have children between the ages of 13 to 17 and in these zip codes, something like that. Okay, so now we know who we're targeting. Okay, so we put together a Facebook or Instagram ad, and maybe it says something like the 10 signs your child's being bullied, and you might not even know, right? And so Mary, we're calling her Mary because I got to call her something. She's sitting in the living room on her couch. The TV's going on in the background, and whatever, the kids are fighting in the background. And she's on her phone, and she's just scrolling through, cat videos and what her neighbors had for dinner and the latest political tirade. And she sees this sponsored post, the 10 signs your child being bullied, and you may not even know. She's thinking, huh, yeah, I mean, I might not know. So she clicks on it and she goes to a landing page, not a home page, right? This page addresses just what she clicked on. That's the key, is this
Yep.
continuity. She was interested in one specific topic, not the entire school, right? She's interested in this case, school bullying. So she goes to a landing page, and maybe on there's some statistics about the percentage of bullying that goes unreported in a public school system. And, you know, maybe she just said yes to something. She's in the yes mode. So maybe you're also offering her, well, you're going to give this away for free, okay? But we have to send it somewhere. We just need your name and the email address, right? And so that is called a lead magnet, right? So Mary puts her name in, Mary, and here's her email address, and she hits the button. Then she goes to a thank you page, which may or may not have the words thank you on it. That's just an industry term. But she goes to the thank you page, right? Now we have her name and email address. So she's free to download that 10 signs guide right there. And three things happen simultaneously. One, she can download the information there. Two, she gets an email in her inbox, basically the same information that was on the thank you page, except once she leaves that thank you page, she's gone. The only path in through there was from the original ad. It's not in the main navigation of the website, okay? But she gets an email, and it's going to stay in her inbox until she decides she doesn't want it in her inbox any longer. The other advantage is she can forward it to her spouse, her parents, her neighbors, so it has a certain viral component to it, right? The third thing that happens is she goes into the school's database. That's where the marketing automation takes over, or the drip email. So maybe 2 days later, Mary gets an email and it says, uh, "Hi, Mary. We know her name, right? Because her name is automatically inserted. Hi, Mary. I noticed you downloaded our guide about school bullying. Sure, hope this isn't an issue for your family, but if it's something that you think we can help, our school knows how to deal with this issue. Love to talk to you about it. Hey, by the way, here's a short video of our kids learning and having a great time at the science fair. Thought you might like to see this, right? Now there's a video to engage her. In other words, showing a little bit more about the school. Maybe 3-4 days later, Mary gets another email. Hey, Mary, hope you enjoyed that video about our science fair. It was a big hit. Thought you might like to meet some of the folks who put the production on. And then there's a link to maybe the school's page with all the instructors, with pictures and their bios on there. Right now you're putting a face to it, to the school. It's not a nameless, faceless institution, right? And then a third one, if you see where this is going, right? So there's a predetermined strategy, right? Keep in mind, you're invested good money on that paid ads, right? Don't just drop them off on the homepage. I mean, and I'll add one extra thing to that formula I just thought about, is there's something called lead scoring, right? So lead scoring, it's beautiful in its simplicity, right? So it goes like this. Every time let's call it a parent in this particular case, could be a student, every time a parent opens up an email, we assign them 5 points. Every time they click on a link on an email, we assign them 15. Every time they download something through the email, we assign them 25 points. When a parent or student they accumulate a total of whatever, 75 points, 100 points. They are clearly more engaged with the school than is the parent that's only accumulated 10 points because they opened up the first 2 emails and never did anything else. Well, that parent that's accumulated 75 or 100 points, right, goes down a different path now. Come on. Why would they have opened up all those emails, clicked on those links down, unless they were serious? They're ready for the next level. They're ready for more personal interaction. So what I had just kind of described was really all the different aspects of these various tools that we're talking about, right? They all come into play. Everything from the reviews, which would be on the website or people looking into you, but we're talking about paid ads. And what I'm preaching to you is don't waste your money by haphazardly throwing money at Google and Facebook without a plan, because they're not giving it back.
Yes, I love that point of having a plan. Anything to do with marketing, especially when you're spending good money on it for like a paid ad, is really important. So you can plan out every single step of the way and you can continue engaging with people and tying all of these tools together that we're talking about today. So just a quick recap of those tools, the 5 tools. You need a mobile responsive website, an email tool, social media channels, listings and review sites, and then an easy way to create content so that you can draw people in. So we're nearing the end of our hour here, and we've got a lot of great information. I just want to recap everything we've talked about today. So we talked about the mobile responsive website. You don't just need a website, but it needs to be set up, and it needs to be set up as a resource for potential students and families when they land there from a Google search especially. On that website, make sure you're capturing email addresses from your website visitors so that you can communicate with them later on. Again, that kind of ties into the ads that Chuck was just talking about. And then, of course, email should really be a part of your strategy as well. You can communicate with current and prospective students and family, and also not just promoting your school to prospective students. You want to make sure you're sharing helpful and valuable content, which Chuck has shared so many great ideas of that today. And then social media, don't forget, it really is social. You've got to be there, engage and interact with people. And, more specifically, you can drive awareness of your school, engage with them, and get them to take further action. And then, of course, for listings and reviews, you want to make sure that you're there. One of the biggest points Chuck said in setting them up is making sure that your information is consistent across your website and every review site you're using. You want to try to gain reviews. Alumni is a great instance of that, or using the NPS score, as Chuck said before, so that you can really get some reviews and start to build trust with people. And then last but not least, tie in those paid ads so that you can start to amplify your efforts and especially start driving prospective students and enrollments. Chuck, I know we just recapped a lot. Is there anything else that maybe you want to leave the audience with today?
Well, I'd say the main thing here, and I just kind of beat it to death, is have a strategy, have a plan. That's one of the things we do is a digital marketing blueprint for schools, and it's a complete analysis and strategy. I just put my sales hat on, you can tell, right? But even if, you don't engage with us or an outside agency or consultant, have a plan, right? And think in terms of who you're marketing to, the parents, the students, that sort of thing. That's what you have to build your website to deliver your messaging to. So have a plan.
Definitely. Sit down and plan it out. So here is the guide that we've mentioned earlier in the session, the download Making Sense of Online Marketing for Education. It touched on a lot of the pieces we talked about today in a lot more detail. So definitely make sure you download it from the chat window so that you can reference it later on as you're setting up your plan. And Chuck, I know you also had an offer. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that for our audience?
Yeah, I said early on when you first introduced me that we support schools and education. So each month we donate 4 free, what we call web scan, their website analysis and consultations, one to 4 different schools each month. But because we're still going to stay on that pace, but I'm going to kind of waive that for the people on this audience. And that also goes for people who are watching on the replay. Just mention Constant Contact. I'm telling you this, you will enjoy this. It will be insightful. It's kind of fun, but it could be pretty critical. It'll take a look at your existing website and things that you can fix, actual things you can fix yourself because of the consulting portion. And in this case, I'll do it all myself. I'll make some suggestions for you. We'll also take a look at some of the competing schools in the area. And so go to schoolwebsiteaudit.com. That's just a forwarding link. It'll go to a landing page. Remember, we don't just drop people off on the home page, do we, right?
Yes.
So go to schoolwebsiteaudit.com and just fill out the form and just mention Constant Contact so I know that, I can bypass that 4 per month limit, okay?
Definitely. And I see Rachel's just shared that in the chat window as well, so you can take advantage of that. Um, what I want to mention before we get to the few questions that have come in is that when we close out of the webinar today, a survey is going to pop up on your screen. If you wouldn't mind just taking a minute or two to answer 2 simple questions and let us know what you thought about the webinar today, that would be wonderful. Let us know how we did. All right, so this first question comes from Dave. Do you recommend multiple blogs for a school?
Yeah, we've been down that road and it's tricky. It's tricky. We've done that, excuse me. But now you have like more to monitor, more to handle. And then what happens is you have a blog and maybe whoever wanted the blog, it could have been the athletic program. They might have done their own blog for athletics and maybe it gets abandoned. They just, it sounded good in the beginning. Now you got a blog with a few posts and it hasn't been updated since 2017. And what do you do with it? Do you hide it? You get rid of it? You also have more to review what's appropriate, right? You have to have a social media policy, which could cover the blog posting. So it could get a little cumbersome. So what we've done in the past is we've been down that route and ultimately we wind up consolidating it into one blog with different tags, on it. So my recommendation is keep it simple, one blog across a nice variety of subjects, and then you know then you can promote it through social media to the right groups.
Definitely. And, blogs are a great starting point for so many things like your email marketing strategy, like you said, your social media and all of that. I think you touched on this a bit earlier. In paid advertising, should you bid on your school's name? Do you want to elaborate a bit?
Yeah, that's always that could be kind of an iffy thing, right? A lot of schools and businesses will say, well, why would I pay for my own name when I show up anyway, right? Well, there's a couple of reasons. You may or may not, right? One is that whole word of mouth component, and the other forms of advertising where people are looking for you by school name because they don't know your website address. And I alluded to this earlier, that's probably the single least expensive click because it's probably the least competitive because other schools are probably not bidding on your name. Now that brings it to another thing, right? Sometimes schools do bid on your name. They bid on businesses, because they're trying to ride the coattails, right? Sometimes Google is, if it's close enough, right, to your school name. So for example, and I'm just thinking about this, one of the earlier slides where it said something day school in Falls Church or something like that, right? Maybe Falls Church Day School isn't bidding on their own name, but there are other schools in Falls Church that are bidding, not trying to be competitive with it, and they'll show up and the real Falls Church doesn't show up because they're not bidding on it, right? So to me, it generally makes sense to bid on your own name because it's not that expensive click. If it's in the budget, just bite the bullet, pay a little bit, just absorb it a little bit because it only takes one enrollment ever to wipe out all that expense. Just one person who found you that otherwise wouldn't have.
Definitely. And that's a good point too, because um, when I forget what the exact stat is, but I know a good majority of clicks actually go to those ads at the top. So if you can compete and bid on your name, I would definitely agree with Chuck and go that route as well. So I do see we're at the past the top of the hour, and it looks like we've gotten all of the questions here. I do want to thank you, Chuck, for joining us. I think you've provided a ton of really great information. For the audience here, I want to thank you all for joining us as well and sharing your questions with us. We will be sending out a follow-up email. We'll include the information that Chuck was talking about in terms of the content cluster, and also we'll include his website because I know there were a few questions about your contact information, and then the recording will be in there as well. So we'll go ahead and close out of the webinar today. Again, please take a minute or two to tell us what you thought about the webinar. It's literally 2 questions and a short survey. So thanks again, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, Stephanie.